Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the spade-shaped cloth. This is the third in our series of card suit crochet patterns. We started with the heart, we added the diamond, and now we're on to the spade. Let's get started. To make this pattern, I used a USH 5mm crochet hook. This one happens to be by Furls. I also used 40 yards of lily, sugar, and cream. But of course, you can use whatever yarn and hook to make this motif the size you'd like. Thread for tiny little coasters or maybe a garland. Great big thick yarn for wall decor. Be sure to have some fun with it. While this is shown in bright navy, of course, black would be the traditional color. I'll be using blue to demonstrate today. Having a couple stitch markers is also super helpful when making this pattern. The finished spade-shaped cloth is about 9 inches tall and 7.5 inches wide. Let's take a closer look. The spade-shaped cloth starts with a modification of our heart-shaped cloth. If I flip this over, you can see the similarities already. So what I did was make a smaller version of the heart, and then it's all in the border where we go all the way around and add this stem, and we create the perfect spade shape. Let's go ahead and get stitching. Okay, as you can see, I've already got the slip knot on my hook. So now we're ready to begin row 1. I'm going to start by chaining 3. 1, 2, and 3. Now, this chain of 3 is going to count as our first double crochet now and throughout. So this is where I'm going to grab one of my stitch markers. There we go. And put that right in the top of that third chain. This way, I know when I come across for the next row, this will be the last stitch that I work into. Then, get that back on my hook. What we're going to do is work 2 double crochets in the third chain from the hook, aka the very first one we made, right back down next to the slip knot. So I like to work into the underneath loop, but for this pattern, it really doesn't matter. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make these 2 double crochets here. So after you've made those 2 double crochets, your first instinct might be to pull down on that tail and close up that chain. But we want to leave it open because we're going to work into there one more time as we make our border. So for now, let's leave it open, and we have these 3 double crochets as our first row. Now, if you've been following Moogly patterns for a while, you might notice that usually I would work something more like a chainless starting double crochet or a double crochet substitute instead of using chain 3 for our double crochet. But for this series of patterns, it actually works just fine, if not better, to go ahead and use the chain 3 instead. So that's what I'll be doing today. Now let's go ahead and start row 2. So to begin row 2, I'm going to chain 3 again, 2, and 3. And if you find you have trouble working back into your chains as double crochets, then make sure to make that third chain just a little bit bigger than the others. I'm going to go ahead and put another stitch marker in the top of this one. Now, of course, we can turn if you haven't already, and now we're going to work 2 double crochets right into that very first stitch. So, since we count that chain 3 as our first double crochet of the row, this means we've now worked 3 stitches total, officially, into that first stitch. We've got our chain 3 and 2 double crochets. Now, we're simply going to skip that stitch in the middle and work 3 double crochets right into the top of that chain 3. You can move the stitch marker out ahead of time if it's in your way, or you can leave it there while you stitch. It's up to you. There's 1, 2, and 3. There we go. So we went from having 3 double crochets in our first row, and now at the end of our second row, we have a total of 6 double crochets. To make row 3, we start again by chaining 3 and mark the top of that chain. There we go. Then, again, we're going to work 2 double crochets right into that first stitch. So if you haven't made the heart yet, you're learning most of the heart here as we make the spade. There we go. So you've got your chain 3 and 2 double crochets in the first stitch. Now we're going to skip the next 2 stitches and put 3 double crochets between the previous stitch and the next stitch. So we skip these 2 right here but then we go between that previous one and the next one, right in between those 2 sets of 3. Again, if you've made the granny stitch before, this probably seems very familiar. Some granny stitch patterns will have a chain 1 in between their groups of 3 double crochets, but not all of them. And this one does not. So we've got 3 double crochets there in between our 2 groups of 3. So to finish it out, we're going to put 3 double crochets right into that marked stitch. So we skip those next 2 and go right to that last one. Again, my stitch marker wants to be in the way, so I'll take that out first. There we go. And then we just work our 3 double crochets right into that top of that chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. So now at the end of row 3, you've noticed we've increased by another 3 stitches. So now there should be 9 stitches total. For row 4, we're continuing in pattern. Again, we're going to start with a chain of 3. Make that third one just a little bit bigger there. I always like to mark that, makes it easier to find. Then turn if we haven't already, work 2 double crochets right into that first stitch, just as we did before. 1 and 2. Then skip 2 stitches and work 3 double crochets in between that previous and the next. So right into that space there between those 2 posts. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to skip 3 stitches and work 3 double crochets right in that space. We're officially working between the posts because there's not a chain 1, so there's no chain 1 space to work into. So if you follow along with the written pattern, that's why it will say between that previous and the next stitch. So now we're going to finish up this row. We can look at our work and see right where we are. We're going to skip those 2 and work 3 double crochets right in that last stitch. That stitch marker set to the side. There's 1 and 2 and 3. So now we've finished up row 4, and again, we've increased by another 3 stitches. So you should have a total of 12 stitches, 3, 6, 9, 12, at the end of row 4. Okay, now we're ready for row 5, and rows 6 and 7 are repeats of row 5 that will continue to increase 3 stitches per row. So let's go ahead and make row 5 together. Again, we're going to start with our chain 3. Put our stitch marker in there. It's optional, but I am a huge fan of stitch markers. 2 double crochets right in that first stitch again. And by now, hopefully, along with the written pattern, you can see sort of the pattern that we're establishing here. We're going to skip those 2. You can see the space ready and waiting for us right there between that previous and that next stitch to put 3 double crochets in it. 1, 2, and 3. And then we can simply look at our work. We've got a group of 3. We're going to skip them and put another set of 3 double crochets right in there. So 2 and a third one for that space. And then we can come back and look at our work. There's another group of 3 with a space after it, so we're going to put 3 in there. 1, 2, and 3. So as we continue to grow, we'll just be adding another group to the width every time. So now we can look at our work and see where we're at. You can see there's that one group of 3 left with our marked stitch, so that means we're going to put 3 double crochets right in that marked stitch. Here's the first one. We'll get that stitch marker on out of the way. I need 2 more in order to maintain this V shape we're making. Our spade, of course, is worked top down. So we're making the width right now. So now here we're at the end of row 5, and that's very easy to see because we have 15 stitches. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. So continue to make 2 more rows just like row 5, increasing by 3 stitches every time. You're going to work in each one of those spaces, and then of course 3 stitches again in the end. So I'll see you when we've finished row 7. So this is what it should look like at the end of row 7 with a total of 21 stitches. You can see we've got our 7 groups of 3. So now we're ready to begin row 8. Rows 8 through 10 are going to soften this angle a little bit and start bringing in the sides of our spade. So, like the rest of our rows, we're going to begin again with a chain of 3. Put my stitch marker right in there. And then this time, when we turn here, we're going to double crochet just once in this first stitch. We're going to slow down that rate of increase. There we go. Then we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and here in the middle, it's going to be pretty much the same until we get to the end. So work the same pattern you've been working here across, where we just skip 3, work 3 in between, and I'll meet you back here at the end of row 8, where we have our small difference. All right, so here I am at the end of row 8. You can see we started with 2 stitches and then worked as we've been working all the way across until we get to the end. So here we just want to be sure to mimic what we did at the beginning, and rather than working 3 double crochets in this last stitch, we're only going to work 2. So at the end of row 8, you should have a total of 22 stitches. And there we have it. To begin row 9, we again chain 3. The same way we've been beginning, I believe, every row so far. There we go. Turn. And then now for this row, we're actually going to go ahead and skip that next stitch and go right to that space in between there. You can see we've got a group of 2 here and a group of 3. We're going to go right in between. And right here, we're going to go ahead and put 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, and 3. There we go. So now we're going to continue to, again, work in pattern, 3 double crochets in between each group until we get to the end. So I'll meet you at the end of row 9. So now I'm ready to finish up row 9. You can see we started with 1, had our groups of 3. I've worked all the way across to the end. So now we're going to skip that stitch and just work 1 double crochet right in that very last stitch. Remember, for symmetry, we want the beginning and the ends of our rows to match. So that's row 9 with a total of 23 stitches. Row 10 starts again with a chain of 3, which I've already made right here. So there's my stitch marker right in the top. Then for row 10, we're going to work a double crochet right back in that first stitch again, like so, but just the one. Then we skip 3 stitches and we work our way across just as we were doing before. So I will see you when we get to the end of row 10. So we started row 10 with our chain 3 and double crochet, then we went back to the pattern we've been following, and now, according to our instructions, we stop here with 4 stitches left, 1 group of 3, plus that final stitch right there. So to finish up row 10, we're going to skip these 3 stitches right here and put 2 double crochets right in the top of that last stitch. And that will mimic, again, what we had at the beginning. So let me put my second one in there. And then you can see this is what row 10 should look like with a total of 22 stitches. Now we're ready to split up and start making the 2 lobes at the bottom of our spade. Similar to when we were making the heart, you can see again we're working from the top down. So this is the point where we've reached, and now it's time to split up into those 2 sections. But we don't have to break the yarn yet. We're going to keep going here and make our first bottom lobe. So officially this is row 11. And again, I'm going to start with my chain of 3. Pull up just a little bit more yarn there. There we go. And put that stitch marker right in the top. Now, we're going to work halfway across this row and leave the second half unworked, and then we'll come back and add that second lobe later. So we've got our chain 3. We're going to skip the next stitch and work just 2 double crochets between that previous and the next stitch. So in that first section there, we just put 2 double crochets in there. So there's 1 and 2. There we go. Then we're going to skip 3 stitches and work 3 double crochets in between, just like we were doing before, but we're only going to do that 2 times. So into this space and this one. So let's go ahead and make that first set of 3. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And then we do that set of instructions. If you're following along, that's the section in the brackets. Skip the next 3, 3 double crochet in that next space. So that's 2 times that we've done that. 1, or about almost 2 times we've done it. Almost finished. There's 2 and 3. Okay, so now we have repeated the section in the brackets twice. So after that, we skip the next 3 stitches, double crochet between that previous and the next stitch, and then we turn. If you look closely, you can see this is the center point of that previous row. So we just put 1 double crochet in there, and then we turn and move on to row 12. But this is what it should look like at the end of row 11. And you should have a total of 10 double crochets in this row. So for row 12, we start again with our chain 3. Remember, we're going to turn and work back across the previous row. We'll come back and work that second lobe later. So after our double crochet is made there, which is really just our chain 3, we're going to work another double crochet right into that first stitch. There we go. And then we are going to skip the next 3 stitches, work 3 double crochets in between. There's 1, 2, and 3. Then we go back to our instructions while we look at our work here. We're going to skip the next 3 stitches, and then work 2 double crochets in this section right here. So 1 and 2. And then what we're going to do is skip these 2 double crochets right here and work 2 double crochets in that very last marked stitch. So there's 1, and there is 2. Managed to squeeze those in there even with my stitch marker. So I'll move that out of the way so it's ready to begin the next row. And we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 double crochets here in row 12. So row 13, we once again begin with our chain 3. So I've gone ahead and put that in there. And now we need to skip 3 stitches and then 3 double crochets between the previous and the next stitch. So let's look at our work. We've got this double crochet, substitute, our chain 3, counts as being worked in the stitch. Then we skip 1, 2, 3. And hold that up a little better. 1, 2, 3. So that's going to put us right in that spot right there. We want to put 3. Let me just double check. Yep, 3 double crochets there. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. Then we're going to skip 4 stitches and double crochet in the last stitch. So we're going to skip all of these 3. We know that's a group of 3. 1, 2, 3. Skip that 4th one. Brings us to that very last stitch. So we just put 1 double crochet right in that last stitch. There we go. So I can move that stitch marker out of the way again. And at the end of row 13, we have a total of 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So with row 14, we'll be able to finish up this first lobe. Now, row 14 is our one exception. The rest of our rows here have all started with that chain 3. We're going to start with a chain 3 again, but in this row, it's not going to count as a double crochet. So we don't need to put a stitch marker in that 3rd chain. We're just going to chain 3, skip these 3 stitches, and slip stitch right in that marked last stitch. It might seem silly, but that little chain 3 space right there allows us to create a really beautiful rounded border when we come back to do that. But for now, we are done making our first lobe. So you'll want to go ahead and grab your scissors and cut your yarn. I do recommend leaving a 4 to 6 inch tail to weave it in at the end. Now, you can go ahead and yarn over and pull that tail end through, but I prefer to just pull up on it and weave it in. And I think that gives it a little bit nicer finish there when we come back around for our border. So we can go ahead and take that stitch marker out, and you can see just how beautiful our first lobe looks. And now we're ready to add our second bottom lobe. The one part of row 14 we didn't do is right at the end where it says turn. We want to come back and add our second lobe from this direction. This is the same direction we were working this row, so this is the same direction we want to be sure to work this row. So I've got my yarn, and now we've got a couple of options. You can simply join to this spot right here. We want to join to that same spot where we finished that row. You can join with a slip stitch and chain 3, or you can join with a double crochet, which is kind of a fun little trick that I like to use. Okay, so to join with a double crochet, what I like to do is put a loop on my hook, yarn over, insert my hook right into that space, yarn over again, pull up my loop, yarn over, pull through that loop and behind our yarn over, and then yarn over and pull through those last 2 loops. I do have a separate tutorial for that stitch on the Moogly YouTube channel if you like. Now I can drop that end and just weave it in when I'm all done. To continue with row 15, I'm going to skip the next 3 stitches and work 3 double crochets between that previous stitch and the next stitch 2 times. We want to make sure that we're mimicking what we did on that first lobe, but of course, since we're going the second half, it's going to be a little bit backwards. We can't just repeat those same rows, or our lobe wouldn't quite have the right shape to it. So we have 3 double crochets right there. We're going to skip the next 3 and do it again. 3 double crochets right in here. 2 and 3. Then we skip the next 3 stitches and work 2 double crochets in between that previous and next. So there's 1 and 2. Finally, to finish up row 15, we skip the next stitch and double crochet in the last stitch. So you'll hear me talk a lot about symmetry, especially when making shapes like this, and they need to make sure the end of each row is doing the same thing. We're doing that here as well. It might not seem like it, where we've got very different ends here, but if you look back and see at the beginning of this side, you can see how this mimics what we have going on right here, and our middles match as well. So for these rows, that's the symmetry we're looking for. And now we've finished row 15, which is that first row of the second bottom lobe, and we're ready to move on to row 16. So now we're ready for row 16, and we can start again with our chain 3. So I've already got that made. Then to continue, we're going to double crochet again in that first stitch. And I say again because of course that first chain 3 counts as our double crochet, our first one for the row. Then we're going to skip 2 stitches and work 2 double crochets between that previous stitch and the next. So there is 1 and 2. There we go. Then we are going to skip 3 stitches and work 3 double crochets in between these 2 groups. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. There we go. Then, returning to our instructions, we skip the next 3 stitches and work 2 double crochets in that last stitch. Now, I probably should have put a stitch marker in the top of that stitch that I joined with, but we just want to go right into the top of it as if it's any other stitch. And again, if you prefer, you can just join with a slip stitch and chain 3 there, just like we were doing before. There we go. So now we have finished row 16, and we should have a total of 9 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So now we're ready for row 17. I've already made my chain 3. So now we're going to skip the next 4 stitches. So that's that second one here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Puts us right in this space right here. We're going to put 3 double crochets right there. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. Then we're going to skip 3 stitches and double crochet in the last stitch. So we know with 2 there, skip that one there, double crochet right in that final stitch. Put that in there. There we go. So we should have a total of 5 stitches again here for row 17. You can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So row 18, we're going to do the same thing we did up here. This is our 1 chain 3 that doesn't count as a double crochet. So we don't need to make that last one bigger. We don't need to use any stitch markers. We can just jump right over to that marked stitch and make a slip stitch. There we go. And with that, we will have finished the second lobe, and we'll be ready to make the border and stem. There we go. You can see we've made that really great shape. So now we're ready to make, as I say, the border and stem, but do not break your yarn. We're going to continue right from where we are. So now we're ready to make the border and stem. We're going to do a single crochet border all the way around, and when we come back to this point, we'll make the stem and then finish up our border. At the end, however, of row 18, we do need to be sure to turn. This way is going to be our right side. You want to make sure you're working around the outside first before we come back to that middle. So we're going to start this round with a chain 1, since it's a round of single crochets. Actually, I like to do that before I turn. There we go. And now we can start our stitching. We're going to work 3 single crochets right into that top chain 3 space. Remember, that's our 1 that didn't count as a double crochet. We're going to work into it just like we're going to work into the sides of the rows as we continue our way around. I do like to go ahead and bring back my stitch marker one more time there to put that in that first stitch. And we need 2 more single crochets right in that chain 3 space. There we go. So you can see that is 3 single crochets right at the very top of that last lobe we made. So now we're going to continue. We're going to work 3 single crochets in the side of the next row. So a lot of times when I'm working into the edge, especially if it's something like a garment, I really like to sort of split that stitch along the side so that the border doesn't become very chunky or distinct. But for this pattern, I really like the way the chunky, distinct border looks. I think it really emphasizes the granny stitch. So I like to go around the whole post as I'm working my way around. This is one of the reasons that having a chain 3 start was totally fine, because it's all going to get covered up with this border anyway. So now we can continue. Back to our instructions, we see the section in brackets that says 3 single crochets in the side of the next row, 2 single crochets in the side of the next row, twice. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to work 3 single crochets in the side of this next row. So there's 2 and 3. Then 2 single crochets in the side of the next row, 1 and 2. Now you can see I'm just looking for those stitches. You can come back and check your work this way if you need to, but just look for each of those spaces. That's going to be the next row. So we've got 3 and 2. We need to do that again. 3 in the next space, 1, 2, 3, and 2 in the next row. 1, split the yarn a little bit. Let me try that again. 1 and 2. There we go. You can see how that brings us around the curve a little bit. So now we're sort of ready to just race on down here to the point, and we're going to work 2 single crochets in the side of each of the next 8 rows. So that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 2 single crochets in the side of each. So I'll see you when we get right back down to the point. So now we put 2 single crochets in the side of each of those last 8 rows along this side. And that brings us back to that very first chain. Remember, right down here when we started our pattern and I said don't close that one up, that is the point at the top of our spade. So, find the end of my yarn here again. We're going to put 3 single crochets right into that final chain there. So I just push that tail end out of the way. There's 1 and 2 and 3. Now, if you did close that up, you forgot, it's not the end of the world. You can sort of push your hook in there and open it back up, make it a little bit easier. Once you've got those 3 stitches in there, you can go ahead and tighten that up if you would prefer. Now we've got the point made and we're ready to start working up the other side. So we want to repeat again what we did here for symmetry. So we're going to work 2 single crochets in the side of each of the next 8 rows, starting up here. So that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now, following along with our instructions, we have another set of brackets. 2 single crochets in the side of the next row, 3 single crochets in the side of that next row, twice. So similar to what we were doing, but backwards, because of course we're coming this way back towards the top. So let's do that together. 2 single crochets in the side of the next row. So there's 1, 2, then 3 single crochets in the side of the next. 1, 2, and 3. 2 in the side of the next. 1, 2, and 3 inside of the next. 1, 2, and 3. So that finishes our repeat with the brackets. Going back to our instructions, we then work 3 single crochets in the side of the next row. So you can see, if we stop and look at our work, we're back up at the top here of this lobe on the opposite side of our spade. So this is the final row we can work into the side of here. We've got 1, 2, and 3 single crochets. And then move that tail out of the way. You can weave these in ahead of time or all at the end. It's up to you. You can see now we're back up at that top, that chain 3 that didn't count as a double crochet. We're going to put our 3 single crochets in there. 1, 2, and 3. And now we're officially in uncharted territory, so to speak. We're going to work our way down here, make the stem, and then finish up this side right here. So to continue, we're going to work 3 single crochets in the side of the next row, and then 2 single crochets in the side of the next 2 rows after that. So 3 single crochets in the side here of this first row, this top row. 1, 2, and 3. And then 2 single crochets in the side of each of the next 2 rows. You can see how that's going to bring us right down to that point. So there's 1 and 2 in the side of that row, and then 2 in the side of this row. 1 and 2. And you can see, let me lay that out again flat here. You can see that's brought us right down to where those 2 sides meet. So now we're ready to make the stem. So we're going to start with a chain of 13. We are, however, going to be working back into all but the last one of these, or I should say the last couple of these chains. So you don't want to make these super tight. Make sure and make chains that you can work back into. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. There we go. So now we're going to work our way back up this chain towards our spade. We're going to skip the 2 chains closest to the hook and work in the underneath hump of the rest of these chains. You can work into the other loops if you prefer, but since this stem doesn't get another border of its own, I really like working into this underneath hump back here because it gives us a really nice finished edge. So I'm going to skip the 2 chains closest to the hook, flip it over, makes it a little easier. In the chain after that, I'm going to work a double crochet. There we are. I don't need to mark anything. We're not coming back to them. Double crochet in the next chain. There we go. And then we are going to half double crochet in the last 9 chains. So all the rest of the way up. So just take your time and work a half double crochet in each of these stitches. Kind of really enjoy, split that yarn a little bit on that one, but I really enjoy that with this pattern. We get to use all 3 of our most basic stitches, really all 4. We've got single crochets, half double crochets, double crochets, and even a couple of slip stitches. So this is a really fun series of patterns for beginner crocheters as well, those who are just learning, to really take some time and learn not only really the 4 most basic stitches, I would say, but also working into the edge and even a little bit of the granny stitch. So I'm just going to continue making my half double crochets here up there. I think I accidentally made a double crochet that last time. So I'll stop talking and keep making my half double crochets, and I'll see you when we've worked our way up to the top. Okay, so now I've half double crocheted all the rest of the way up that stem, and now we're ready to start crocheting into our spade again here, the body of it, if you will. So you can see here is that double crochet that started this lobe. So we want to go right into the side of that row with 2 single crochets. We're working single crochets here for our border. So there's 1 and 2. And remember, it's yarn. You can just hold this out of the way, pull it out of the way. There we go. Get those stitches right in the side of that row. Then, of course, we want to put 2 single crochets in the side of the next row. So there's 1 and 2. We want to mimic what we did on the other side there. And then you can see, if we come back and look at our work, there is our stitch marker. We know we're in the right spot. We want to put 3 single crochets right in the side of this very final row right here. 1, 2, and 3. And now we can go ahead and join that very first stitch of our border, break our yarn, and weave in all of our ends. So if we come back and look at our original, you can see a little bit of blocking does also go a long way for this pattern to really help straighten it out. If you find that your edging is pulling together a little bit, A good strong tug really helps straighten it out. And that's how to crochet the spade-shaped cloth. Remember, you can get this pattern as well as the rest of the card suit patterns on mooglyblog.com. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.